Dynasty Decisions, episode number 86. On this channel, we break down your guys' Dynasty teams, your questions. Are you rebuilding? Are you contending? What kind of trades are you guys making in your leagues? And this is all a good overall look at the Dynasty fantasy football market and how different leagues are behaving. So you guys know the drill around here. If you want to be a part of Dynasty Decisions episodes, you can submit your teams down below in the description. Our Mother Flocker members over on flockfantasy.com get priority submissions, then our Flocker tier. Then we get down to the free submissions. We'll probably run another one of these videos in the next couple days. But either way, before we get into the video, Danny, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. And yeah, we are ready to roll. Obviously, you guys have shown a ton of support for the series, so I'm just ready to get into another episode. But with that being said, let's get into it.
All right, so let's break down the first team here. This one is coming from Panya, who is a Mother Flocker tier member. He is in a 10-team PPR league, 6 point per passing touchdown, 1 quarterback by the looks of it, no super flex in this one. Tua Tagovailoa, Trey Lance, Jared Goff, Aaron Rodgers, and Jordan Love as his main quarterbacks there. Derrick Henry, Isaiah Pacheco, Roshan, Zeke, and some other guys there. Running back, wide receiver, Keenan Allen, Deebo Samuel, Michael Pittman, Jerry Jeudy, Brandon Ayuk, Josh Downs, Jameson Williams buried down there as well, Jaden Reed, and a couple other guys. So pretty deep wide receiver core. At tight end, George Kittle and Dalton Kincaid's pretty much all you need. Looks like he has a bunch of his seconds and thirds and fourths listed from where he was picking in the rookie draft, but he does indicate where he spent those picks. And then it looks like he also has an additional first rounder next year and all of his other future picks as well. So he basically says this is an IDP league, so some of the picks he made were there was defensive players and that kind of thing. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And he also says in 2025, this league will convert to adding a super flex spot. So him having a very deep quarterback core probably serving him in the future once they add that super flex spot. He won the championship with this team, and we can talk about some of the guys that he lost in trade because he decided, you know, I got lucky. Like, I probably shouldn't have won the championship. I lucked into a championship. Now it's time to be proactive. It's time to rebuild this team and sell off some of his assets. So what are your thoughts on some of his, you know, players so far and some of the trades that he made here as well? We'll get into in a second.
Yeah, so if you're looking at the quarterback core, obviously, like you kind of mentioned, once it transitions to Superflex, while you don't have, you know, this set, you know, top end elite level guy, like you still got at least 4 guys there pending the status of Rodgers that you can pretty much count on past this year. So solid core there. Obviously at running back headline, but Derrick Henry, a very win now type of asset. So I am curious to see if you're potentially retooling this thing, what you're planning on doing with Derrick Henry. Because I will say Derrick Henry in particular, Keenan Allen, and I would say
Kittle,
those are the
probably.
only Kittle probably, but I would say like Allen and Henry are like the glaring ones where if you're not competing, like they got to get off your team. So that's what I'll say there. So really solid roster as a whole, pretty deep at wide receiver, anchor running back with Henry and Kittle being the tight end there. Not sure what the IDPs look like, obviously, so I can't really give input there. But if you felt like that you weren't able to compete with this team, I'm probably assuming that it was probably on the IDP end, because I will say from an offensive scoring perspective, I do think you could have potentially ran it back.
Yeah, well, especially considering he had Christian McCaffrey and Tyreek Hill on this team as well, who he then traded away. And we can talk about those trades on April 25th, so shortly before the NFL draft. He traded away Tyreek Hill, received Jerry Jeudy and Jameson Williams. I think that's a good return for Tyreek Hill, but to Danny's point, I think offensively, this team was probably in a spot where you may have gotten one more year out of it, and then you could have maybe torn it down at the end of 2024, maybe shot for some quarterback equity because the league would be then turning to a super flex at some point in time. But overall, what are your thoughts on that trade? Do you think that's a good return for Tyreek Hill, or would you have wanted, you know, maybe a more stable asset?
I think it's a good return. Again, I'm also high on Jerry Jeudy, so my perspective on him, he's, I believe, my wide receiver 18 or 19 in Dynasty. So in terms of tier, I probably view a difference between him and Tyreek Hill at about probably a 24 second. So if we're doing the math there, 24 second, I would prefer Jameson Williams straight up to a 24 second. So from a straight pure value perspective, I do like the Jeudy side here, but when you do combine it in conjunction, I do think you could have ran it back. But if you were to tear it down and you were planning on tearing it down, like you said, I think this is a very valuable deal for you.
Yeah, for sure. He then traded away Kadarius Toney for the 202. Again, pretty
Smash.
solid return there. It's a one quarterback 202, so it's a little bit worse. And he ended up, who did he end up spending? He got Dalton Kincaid with that pick, though. So, and I think that's a good return. I would much rather have Dalton Kincaid than Kadarius Toney.
keep in mind, it's also an IDP rookie draft, so I'm assuming a couple of the IDPs are going to get mixed in there. Obviously, I'm not familiar with IDP, ADP, but I just think from a future capital perspective, like that is somewhat of an influence to keep in mind because obviously there's going to be high-end defensive players going in the rookie draft as well.
Yeah, for sure. And then the last trade, he sent away Christian McCaffrey and Alan Lazard for the 207, 209, and a 2024 first, which projects to be late. The 207 was spent on Roshan Johnson, the 209 on Josh Downs. I think you got great value on those two players. I have them both ranked well ahead of 207 and 209. I would have wanted a better asset, I think, for Christian McCaffrey, just given that he is, so valuable. But I don't think this was a terrible return. I just think, I would have preferred one or two great assets to two, middling assets and then one late first round pick.
Like if that was a mid projected 24 first, I would have been fully on board with it. The late gives me a little bit of sketch because obviously it's a 24 first. So if you're already projecting it late, you kind of figure where the team's going to be settling. And like if it was a 25 first projected to be late at that point, you can kind of convince yourself, well, there's an upside case because this can be early. But realistically, you kind of understand that 24 first, even if it's not late, is probably going to be maxed out at like the 108. So overall, again, I thought you could get a little bit more in a one quarterback league, but I don't think, given your aim of trying to tear the thing down and retool it, especially combining that to potentially get a super flex in by 2025, I don't think that's terrible.
Yeah, and I would say just based on these trades, it looks like you're in a league market that people do value picks and young players highly. Like we've seen leagues where Tyreek Hill and Christian McCaffrey are going for way more than this. So I actually don't agree with your decision to rebuild this thing. I probably would have ran this back for one more year, knowing that that was what was out there on the trade market. As far as like what I would do next, because now you're obviously you're committed to the rebuild. You got to keep going in this path. You obviously need to sell Derrick Henry, Keenan Allen, probably Deebo Samuel, and Kittle. I'd be shopping as well. Knowing that this league is going to a super flex league in 2025, my aim would be to maybe try and offload one or multiple of your like middling quarterbacks, Lance, Goff, Rodgers, Jordan Love, whoever, and go after Trevor Lawrence or Justin Herbert or somebody that come 2025 is still going to be extremely valuable and is still going to hold a lot of value even now, but it's a one quarterback league for the time being. So if you're, going for a long-term rebuild 2024, 2025, you want to make sure that you have 2 or 3 lockdown studs at quarterback by then, because you're not trying to compete now anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. Inquire about what the cost of these guys are going to be, especially if somebody's in a competitive window and you can say, hey, listen, like, I'll give you Tua Tagovailoa and the late projected first round pick that I just got in exchange for Trevor Lawrence. Well, for them, it's like, well, Tua Tagovailoa is still a top 10, top 12-ish type of projected quarterback, and then I'm banking a first to buy production, and it's not a super flex till 2025. So from their perspective, that'll make sense. And obviously from your perspective, come 2025, if you were to offer him Tua Tagovailoa in a late 24 first, he would laugh in your face. But given the circumstances that we're in 2023, you should be able to get away with that type of valuation.
Yeah, and you might be able to use like the quarterback upgrade to offload some of your production as well. You might be able to just get away with Tua and Derrick Henry for Trevor Lawrence or something like that. And that would obviously make some sense. So you got some moves that you got to make. Again, we kind of gave our thoughts on the rebuild in general. We could probably move on to the next team here, which is from Nyheim, who's also a Mother Flocker tier member, 12-team, half PPR league, no tight end premium, also a one quarterback as well. So a bit of one quarterback talk at the top of this video. Joe Burrow's his main guy. Desmond Ridder in reserve, has Tom Brady with LOL beside his name, which is kind of funny. Nyheim has Nyheim Hines on his team, which I'm definitely not shocked by. Jamar Chase, AJ Brown, Christian Watson, and Mike Williams and Mike Evans and some other guys there at wide receiver. TJ Hawkinson is his main tight end. He does have listed here the 108, 202, 206, 212, and 301. It doesn't look like he's had his rookie draft yet. So he probably needs to get some advice on where to spend those picks. And then it looks like he has an extra 1 and an extra 2 in next year's class, both projected to be early. So very common shell that we see, not a lot of running backs, a lot of good wide receivers, a good tight end, a good quarterback. What are your thoughts kind of on this team? He said he came in first the first year of this league, second last year. And he said, league said it was beginner's luck. So he said he tore down most of his team to rebuild, to attempt to become the best again. So he said, it's difficult sometimes trading in these leagues. Usually that's the case. People overvalue their players and they don't understand, trade values and that kind of stuff. He said his rookie draft is actually, it would have already happened by now. He said it was June 2nd, and he submitted this team, I believe, at the end of May. So hopefully we can kind of just tell you what we would have done with those picks. And now that the draft has actually happened, at 108, in a one quarterback format, you'd obviously be praying for one of the receivers to fall to you, Addison, Quentin Johnson, Zay Flowers, but there's a chance that none of those guys would be on the board for you. And I would be cool with going with even Anthony Richardson at that point, but probably Zach Charbonnet, Devon Achane. If you wanted to go with Josh Downs or somebody like that, I probably would have went in that direction there at 108, 202. Again, Downs, some of those ambiguous backfields, Kendre Miller, Roshan Johnson, guys like that. 206, kind of same thing. I'm just, shooting for the ambiguous backfields. Maybe you grab a wide receiver there if you love like a Marvin Mims or a Cedric Tillman or Jalen Hyatt or somebody like that. And then same goes for that 212 and 301. This class, we talked about it ad nauseum in the rookie draft season. There's really no consensus. Once you get outside those top like 5 to 7 players, you could have also gone with Dalton Kincaid at 108 or maybe Michael Mayer at 202. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the rookie draft? And then we'll kind of talk about the rest of his questions here.
Yeah, I mean, like you kind of said, the 108, pick your best wide receiver there, most likely. I will say, though, because it's a one-quarterback league, it's going to be a little trickier because Quentin Johnson should be off the board, Jordan Addison, JSN, and
Kincaid or Flowers is probably your best option there at 108, yep. I would imagine, at least.
Yeah, or I mean, you could always, obviously the draft has happened, but hypothetically, you could have potentially looked into packaging the 108 and the 206 to see if you could have gotten, a mid-projected 2024 first from next year. If you could do something like that, obviously the draft would have already happened. So that's kind of hindsight bias at its best. But that's what I would have done with the 108. In terms of the 202, 206, 212, and 301, honestly, I'd probably just smash a bunch of ambiguous backfields. So Roshan Johnson's, Tyjae Spears isn't ambiguous, but obviously we know Derrick Henry, older running back, Tyjae Spears, day 2 capital, guys like that. Just get your day 2 draft capital type of running back prospects. Tank Bigsby. Just insert
Chase
whatever
Brown,
running back you want to add there. Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's what I would have done. Obviously, you got a couple picks next year to help at your side. You mentioned here that you're trying to trade AJ Brown for another top player since you fear the injury bug. If your other league mates just overvalue your players, just keep AJ Brown. I mean, he's still a top 5 overall dynasty wide receiver. Like, the worst I would take for AJ Brown would probably be Garrett Wilson and a little plus. But realistically, if nobody's willing to offer even that, just keep him.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get a little younger at the position, because AJ Brown is 26 now, and you wanted to go after Wilson, Olave, or London and get a little plus on top of those guys, I don't think that's a bad move. But I wouldn't be selling AJ Brown for anything really less than that. Not unless you're getting multiple firsts and that kind of offer for him. Yeah, exactly. There's really no point in shopping AJ Brown if people are nervous about him like you are. He has like a ton of trades listed here. We're not going to have time to rip through a lot of these trades. Just eyeballing them, I'll let you pick out. Do you have any like 2 that you think are really good that we can kind of talk about? I like the Trey Lance one. He sold Trey Lance in a 1-quarterback league, mind you, for J.K. Dobbins and Cole Kmet. I prefer J.K. Dobbins in Superflex to Trey Lance. So let alone in a 1-quarterback format. I know you don't, but that's where I'm at with Trey Lance. So I love the J.K. Dobbins trade there that you got. And I also, I really like this trade where you sold Kyron Williams for the 208. Like, I don't know who was like, maybe Kyron Williams' parents were in your league. I'm not exactly sure how you got that trade pull off, but anytime you can sell any kind of middling back end, 3rd round, 4th round running back or something, then getting a 2nd round pick for him is a huge win.
The couple that really stand out to me in particular, the first one I think is just an absolute robbery. You moved Najee Etienne in the 106 for AJ Brown the 108 and a 24 first. I don't know how you pulled this off, but I would rather AJ Brown in the 108 significantly, not even just a bit, significantly over ETN in the 106. And then I think Najee, I would rather have the 2024 first, like you guys know. So realistically, I think you got, if you were to do the math there, obviously ETN would be like in that mix as well as the 106. But I would say you got probably 3 of the 4 best assets, or 3 of the 5 best assets.
Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah, definitely. I like the Mike Evans trade too, where you got your own first back. That's definitely something you're going to need in a rebuild. And then also, finally, the Pittman and the 312 for Dotson and the 209. I think if you're building out a productive struggle, you move off of a guy who's almost 26 for a guy who's 22 years old. You definitely shave off some years there. So we can move on actually to the next team here, which is from Angantyr. I never know how to pronounce his name, but he is a mother flocker 12 team. PPR league, 4-point per passing touchdown, half tight end premium. Finally, we get a super flex format here. Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, and CJ Stroud will do you just fine at the quarterback position. Bijan Robinson, Khalil Herbert, James Conner, some other guys there. Olave, Judy, Christian Watson, George Pickens, Michael Gallup, Wan'Dale Robinson, some dudes there at wide receiver. And then TJ Hawkinson is his main tight end. It looks like he's already had his rookie draft, so he doesn't list any picks there. And then he also has an extra one and an extra 2 in 2024. So he said he's really looking for some tips on how to finish turning this productive struggle around and try and compete this season. He said he doesn't like his depth at all. Maybe he should aim for 2024. I agree with that statement. I don't think your depth is quite strong enough to compete yet this year, but this is, tried and true house money team. That's the way I look at this. You got 2 1s next year. You got 2 2s next year. You're going to be able to add more running back talent, maybe some wide receiver depth. Your tight end and quarterback cores are fine. So realistically, all you have to do is add out skill position players and you'll be ready to compete. So, I mean, maybe if you get it to a point this season, you're like week 6 or something, James Conner's like having like a monster season randomly. Khalil Herbert's like the starter for the Bears, and some of your depth is picking up the pace. Like Gallup's like a flex play. Pickens is, taking a step forward, that kind of stuff. Maybe you could make a move at that point in time for like another receiver, another running back, whatever you need to do. But this one, I probably wouldn't be forcing anything. It's a shallow league format, start 9 type of league. So studs are going to, push you along the right way. And if you can get yourself 2 mid-first to add to this team next year, you're going to be able to get yourself 2 other great players to add at running back and wide receiver.
Yeah, plug in Raheem Sanders, plug in Travion Henderson, plug in hypothetically Donovan Edwards has a breakout season. Like there's a lot of running backs that can materialize. And I mean, obviously with this team, because you're set at quarterback, because you set at wide receiver, because you're set at tight end, having a strong 2024 running back class is really big for you. So I think like you kind of said, like Corey said, having those 2 2024 first, obviously, if it comes a point in the season where Bijan Robinson's the running back 2 in fantasy and Olave's broken out and Lamar and Hurts are combining you 55 points per game or something ludicrous like that. And at that point, you want to say, hey, listen, my 2024 first is probably projected late, and I can buy, a couple productive win now players, or
Josh Jacobs and Keenan Allen are on someone's team, and you can give them your 1 and 2 for those guys or something. Then I would absolutely explore a move like that, but only at that point in time. I would probably enter this season expecting not to compete, or at least be a house money contender and kind of wait and see what happens. But if all your young players, your receivers especially, start to hit, tight ends looking good, quarterbacks are doing the Lord's work, Bijan's like a top 5 running back, then you could probably compete year 1 with this team. He also made some trades here. He lists in season, he made a trade where he traded away T. Higgins, Ramondre Stevenson, Michael Pittman, 111 and a 2024 second. And he got Jalen Hurts and Chris Olave and a 2024 third. So let's just see if this is even enough for Jalen Hurts.
It's not.
Higgins is what? A 3rd round startup pick. Stevenson's like a 6th round startup pick. So is Pittman. 111's same around 7th round startup pick and a 24 second. I personally wouldn't take that for Jalen Hurts.
I wouldn't either. I wouldn't either. Like realistically, I don't know how you got this, but I don't. First of all, not only did you get Hurts and Olave, but I don't know how you convinced him to throw you just a 3rd back. You're like, you know what? I'm giving you some of these flexible players. Just give me a 3rd. Come on. All jokes aside, though, this is a phenomenal deal. I can see why you even highlighted it, because the other deals like you left, which were, I mean, like the bottom one I like, the top one I'll talk about in a second, but this one is an absolute smash out of the park. Took him to the woodshed, done deal type of thing. This deal, though, I will say, May 25th, a little bit steep for me just because of James Conner's volatility on the market. I like picking up Gallup for the cheap, but realistically, I think his valuation is more so like a late 2nd, maybe early 3rd. I'm giving markets because of the bad year he had. And if I'm equating it, I just personally wouldn't be willing to give a 24 second to James Conner. So I'm not the biggest fan, but obviously you needed a running back. If that's a late projected 2nd, I guess it's more stomachable. So not the hugest fan of this top deal, but this bottom deal, I think you absolutely smashed it out of the park. 24 2nd and 1st. Get rid of Hollywood Brown and Miles Sanders from your team. Just a lot more flexibility, a lot more liquidity for your team, and a lot more buying power in season if you were to notice that your house money contender was on the verge of contending.
Yeah, I would say keep an eye on the teams that have like fragile looking teams. Like I'm sure there's a couple teams in your league where you look at their starting lineup and you're like, okay, they have like maybe 5 good players. But if they suffer a couple injuries, they're going to be going down fast. And that team might have, like I said, Josh Jacobs and Keenan Allen on it. And you can trade your 1 and 2 midseason if you need to for those players. So yeah, you're in a pretty good spot. House money contender is a very good feeling, I would say. It's like one of my favorite feelings in Dynasty. Obviously, your best feeling is like when you have a bunch of picks and you have the greatest team of like anybody in your league. But the more realistic good feeling is when you've built out a productive struggle the right way and you're just kind of playing with house money at that point. You're like, I'm going to win in the next coming years, but this year, maybe I can actually be competitive already. So number 4 team that we're going to break down here is from Jay Full, also a mother flocker here, 12 team, start 10 league, super flex, half PPR, 6 point per passing touchdown with a half point tight end premium. Trey Lance, Bryce Young as his top 2 quarterbacks. Nothing really going on at running back there outside of like Gus Edwards and some other dudes. Drake London is his main wide receiver, but that's pretty much it. And then Daniel Bellinger is main tight end. So very, very barren looking squad, but he does have, what is that? 5 2024 first, 324 seconds, couple thirds, 3 ones in 2025 and some extra mid-round picks in 25 as well. This is a war chest. This is the war chest of all war chests.
Yeah, I forgot you had this many picks. Very, very strong team, by the way, or a very, very strong pick collection. By the way, this is what, like the 6th or 7th team submitted in this league. So everybody's just having like a round table, just hearing everybody else's thoughts or our thoughts on what everybody else should do. So really funny there. But overall, yeah, I do remember, I believe in the rookie draft, he was able to get Doc's 25 first for Sky Moore in a couple seconds. I think we literally went over that trade in the last Dynasty Decisions video from Doc's perspective.
Yeah, it's wild that we've broken down like so many of these teams. Like I'm sure some of the firsts that he has are from mine and your team as well, because I actually still have my 2024 first now that I think about it. But I'm sure there's a lot of people who've given up first in this league. Yeah, we can rip through the trades really quick. Obviously, Jay Full is we've covered pretty much every contender in this league. My team, your team, AJ's team, Doc's team. We've covered Flet's team is also, I believe, a rebuilding team as well. But he's got the war chest of all war chests, which is impressive considering a lot of people in this league are aware of draft capital and how important it is. So the fact that you've been able to build up this kind of war chest is definitely helpful. He sent away the 111, which became Zay Flowers, the 305, which became Cedric Tillman, got Christian Kirk in the 204. I probably would have stuck with the young receiver in your spot, but let me know midseason. I might be interested in trading for Christian Kirk. And then he actually traded Christian Kirk away. 202, Devon A-Chain, 204, Jonathan Mingo, as well as Christian Kirk to get a 2024 first in the 211.
The funniest thing is I was the one who sent him the 111 because I traded him the 111 and the 310 for DJ Moore. So just like a whole like pyramid scheme of trades, like with all of us just dealing with the same assets. But yeah, no, it's just so funny. But I mean, if we're bottom lining this, it's basically what is it here? So the 111, the 305, and Zay Flowers, Cedric Tillman, and Devon A-Chain for the 2024 first and the 211. I don't know what you did with the 211, but on face value, given the context of your team, you're not competing this year. You are in the Caleb Williams sweepstakes and arguably one of the top 1 or 2 contenders for Caleb Williams. I think this is a great trade for what you're trying to do with your team. And obviously this next deal, I absolutely love from your perspective too. You just basically turn Will Levis into a future first round pick. I understand taking a young potential appreciating quarterback in most teams' frame of mind is a good move. But for you, it's like, why would I accept the volatility on an asset that I don't need right now and I don't want producing for my team? So for you, you're basically like, hey, listen, I'll trade this late first, this 110 for a random 2025 first with the upside to be higher than the 110. And worst case, if it's just the 110 again, I'm just re-rolling on the same type of asset.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe the 2025 class is deeper than this year's class was, and you get a better prospect than what Will Levis represented. So yeah, let me. I'm looking at this team. I'm trying to figure out if I want anybody on it because, like, I mean, I'm obviously a heavy contender, as is Danny. But I'm looking for quarterback is all I care about right now. If you guys watched like how I spent my rookie picks, I can't find a quarterback to save my life outside of Justin Fields and then like my Brock Purdy and Sam Howell types that I have behind him. I need like a stable win now guy. Unfortunately, I'm not going to find it from Jay Full's team, but you've built out this thing pretty well. Now, I mean, going forward, your goal is Caleb Williams. Your goal is Drake May. Your goal is Marvin Harrison. Like you're just trying to tank this thing out pretty much.
Hey, if I'm playing matchmaker, you throw a fucking late third for Jacoby Brissett. You have Sam Howell. At least you're guaranteed a third quarterback in a competing window.
I guess. I don't know. If you wanted to sell Bryce Young to me, I'd honestly be willing to pony up for him as like a stable quarterback option because I still have all my picks in the future. So I'm cool fucking selling my picks for Bryce Young. I love me some Bryce Young. So number 5 team that we're gonna break down in this video is Paxton's team. He is a flocker member, so not quite a mother flocker, but 12 team start 10 super flex league here. Josh Allen, Geno Smith, Trey Lance as his main quarterbacks. Brees, J.K. Dobbins, James Conner, Rashad Penny there at running back. A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Drake London, Elijah Moore, mainly at wide receiver with some upside guys behind him. And then Dallas Goedert is his main tight end, does not have his second in 2024. And it looks like he's already had his rookie draft as well. So he's talked about, how he usually goes for productive struggle and like rebuild type of teams because he's an FSC disciple is what he lists himself here as. But he figured he would say fuck it and see what it was like to go all in. This is year 3 of a league. And he kind of lucked into a bunch of really good wide receivers. He said he did the draft when he knew nothing about Dynasty and somehow just like hit on Amon-Ra and some of these guys. And he said he still doesn't know much, but he said he wants to get a good quarterback too, and running back, wanting to know how he should use his 2025 first and second to get any more win now pieces, kind of looking to fully sell out is what he lists here. So what are your thoughts on this team? What would you kind of do to approach this?
Yeah, so I mean, clearly you're in a win now window with Josh Allen, with Breece Hall, AJ Brown. Like, you got players that, if you're healthy, especially in a start 10 where you're not starting, fucking 4 flexes a week, like you got, a pretty decently shallow lineup to the point where you have the star talent to be able to win out there. So I definitely do think that this is a contending type of team. I will say I am a little bit concerned with what's going on in terms of the running back depth potentially in season, because if Breece Hall misses a little bit of time to start the year, J.K. Dobbins maybe doesn't get the full workload, like James Conner is going to be your only quote unquote reliable bell cow type of back, and that's going to be on arguably the worst team in the NFC. So that's what I would say. Like, obviously, I'm not making moves because you still have strength at the position, but I will say if it comes a point in season and you have to throw, one of those Nico Collins types, your Sky Moore types, and you have to pick up another back at that point, you might have to make that type of move. But let's just get on to the trades, because I think overall the team, it's pretty clear you're trying to win now. You have an advantage at tight end. You have an advantage, especially at the quarterback 1, and you have Geno Smith, who can be a reliable quarterback 2 for you. And you have, when they're fully healthy, a really solid running back core. Let's get on to trades. This first deal sent away 2 late 2024 firsts and a second in exchange for Breece Hall and James Conner. My only caveat here would be, if you're going to make this deal and you know that you don't really have picks on the back end, I probably would have targeted one of the other elite backs, simply so that you know that they're going to be ready for you come season start. Because if Breece Hall is not fully ready to start the year, it does leave you in a pickle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you got Connor as part of this trade. I think Breece's equivalent value is probably those 2 late firsts, but the 24 second for Connor kind of doesn't really quite balance itself out. I think it was just a steep price to pay, knowing that, like Danny said, if Breece is out for the first 3 games of the season, the first 5 games of the season, you might be caught holding it a little bit, and those picks might not end up being first because you list them as late. I'm assuming one of them is yours. But if you don't, like, you finish as the 6th seed or whatever, that's gonna be a mid first, and that'll probably hurt the end of this deal. In the bottom line. He also sent away Cooper Kupp, Mecole Hardman in the 304 for Geno and Elijah Moore. I think I would have rather just had Kupp on your team. I would have rather bought a different quarterback low. If you were going to go, if Geno was like that high of a price, to me, there's not a huge difference between Geno Smith and even like the lower guys, Matthew Stafford and Jimmy Garoppolo and guys. Like, if you needed somebody to fill your quarterback 2 slot because you don't trust Trey Lance quite yet, I would have rather gone cheap and held on to Cooper Kupp and have him, obviously assist your team in a major way.
Funnily enough, yeah, like, I mean, Matthew Stafford might be like the cheapest upside quarterback available. Obviously, the injury concerns, the age are there, but realistically, the cost probably isn't much higher than like Wan'Dale Robinson in the 3rd round pick. And if that was the type of cost you could have gotten for him, rather than paying Cooper Kupp, a win now player that can help you in your window for Geno Smith
with Stafford also 100%. In this scenario,
I would have rather done that. Hardman and 304, whatever, I don't really care about. Obviously, I like Elijah Moore a good bit, but I just think in your window, Cooper Kupp was a guy who was averaging nearly 25 PPR points per game when healthy last year, and dealing that off your team, given what you're trying to accomplish, was just a little bit tough for me. And then finally, the first move he did of all, we probably should have went in reverse order, but I mean, that's already too late to go back on. Alec Pierce, 104 and 309 were sent for Cooper Kupp in the 2024 mid to late first. So if we're equating this right now, it is basically what Pierce, the 104, 309, Hardman in the 304 for Geno, Elijah Moore in a 2024 mid to late first. What are your thoughts on that?
I like what happened there, but like also you had a mid to late first listed on the receive side, but then when you sent it away, it became a late first. So what happened there? Is it did it suddenly go? Was it your first? Is that why it's now late instead of mid to late when you received it back? I'm not exactly sure.
But that was after dealing Kupp.
What's up?
Sorry, I was just gonna say that was after dealing Kupp too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I probably would have held on to Kupp after you made this Pierce trade. I think this was probably like definitely a good move. Like 104, obviously it sucks to lose out on like Stroud or whoever that would have ended up being. But Cooper Kupp in a mid to late first is a pretty decent return for that, especially for a contender. So I probably would have stopped there. I don't think I would have gone for Geno and the Elijah Moore. If I had to buy a different quarterback low, I would have done that instead, like we kind of just talked about. So he said he definitely thinks he gave too much up for the running backs, but nobody else was budging. if that's how the league market was, because it looks like at some point you had like 3 ones on this team, and including your 2023 104 by the looks of it, you probably could have just house moneyed this thing into a competitive team. And I might have gone in that direction, just given the draft capital that you've kind of outlined.
And I will say we touched upon it in our Dynasty rebuilding versus contending strategy video, but you did mention here you usually go for productive struggle, rebuild Dynasty startups, but figured you'd say fuck it. I would say given this league market, you probably should have chosen a different team to say fuck it with, in my opinion, simply because some of the valuations for the win now type of guys are that of a more competitive, win now type of league dynamic. So for me personally, like if you wanted to go win now, I probably would have gone in more of a productive struggle, rebuilding type of room.
Yeah, exactly. Because me and Danny have, teams of both builds, right? Like I have contending teams, I have productive struggle teams. I've drafted contending teams out of startups. I've drafted rebuilding teams out of startups. We only choose which strategy makes sense for our league market. And often it ends up being productive struggle because a lot of people are very focused on the production that they can get in the draft, but it doesn't mean that we do that all the time. If we're in a league where there's running backs falling to round 10 that are like, second round redraft picks, we're obviously not going to go in the productive struggle realm in that kind of room.
Well, literally in that one, was it Too Lazy to Set Lineups league? I don't have a first round pick until 2026.
I believe I have both of them. And that's why.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I have some all-in type of teams, but also like you guys know me for hating running backs, building a bunch of first round picks, building the Iron Bank. Like I love my productive struggle, but sometimes you got to pick your spots, what type of team to build.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely got some work to do. I would say, mid-season, if you need to buy some more pieces, you could definitely do that. But we can move on to the next team here, which is from Joe Justice, Mother Flocker tier member, 12 team, full PPR, 4-point per passing touchdown, 1.5 tight end premium. So high value placed on the tight end position. And it's a good thing you have Mark Andrews because he is going to be very valuable in this format. You have Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson as your top 2 quarterbacks. Gibbs, Brian Robinson, Penny, some other guys there running back. CeeDee Lamb, Drake London, Ayuk, Pickens, Gallup, Kadarius Toney, Josh Downs. Very well-built team, I will say. It doesn't look like you had any picks this year. I guess you already spent them with Jahmyr Gibbs on your team. But you have all of your future picks and an additional one in 2025 as well.
The question I do have, is it a 1.5 tight end premium or is it 1.5 PPR for tight ends, aka 0.5 premium? We'll just try to ease it in, but it might be either or. So regardless, we're not going to speculate, but we'll just go off it like Corey said, as if it's a 1.5 premium, just because that's what's listed. But it could be just a 1.5 PPR.
Either way, Andrews is going to be more valuable in either format. So yeah, I think this team's ready to compete. I mean, it's a little sketchy because your running backs are not necessarily like proven guys ready to go. You have a rookie running back as your best guy. Brian Robinson and Penny are probably going to be like RB2 flex plays at the best case scenario this year from a redraft perspective. I mean, your quarterbacks are going to drop 30 points a game each potentially. And then your wide receiver core is loaded and your tight end's going to obviously be a big advantage at that point in time. This is the type of team I would absolutely consider shopping my 2024 or the additional 5 first that you have there as well. Go after Najee Harris, Josh Jacobs, somebody that's like still young enough that you can, use them for the next 2 to 3 years, or you can make a splash too and, take 2 of your ones and go after Jonathan Taylor if that's the going rate for somebody like that.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you there. I would also try to see if you can get a quarterback thrown on in one of those deals. Like we mentioned the name Matthew Stafford before. We mentioned, maybe Jimmy G or
Derek Carr.
Yeah, Derek Carr. Obviously, if you want to spend a little bit higher, but it all depends on cost relevant. Like we saw Geno Smith go a little bit more expensive for our taste in the last deal, but different league markets might value Geno Smith differently. Like I've seen Geno Smith in certain leagues go for mid-seconds, and if that's the going rate in your league, go for it at that cost.
Yeah, I tend to believe that like when it comes to veteran quarterbacks, they kind of just like rotate who's good every year. Like last year, would you have had to pay a mid-second for Jared Goff or an early second, or maybe even more than that?
He was a 14th
like the
pick.
lower end, the lower rung of the veteran quarterbacks. And I think this year, Stafford, Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo are the lower rung of the veteran quarterbacks that you can get on the cheap right now.
This is going to sound disgusting, but the lowest bargain bin vet quarterback that you can possibly. I was going to say Tannehill. I like Tannehill as well. I was going to say your boy too, who could be an option.
Yeah, I
get
mean,
him for a third.
I'm assuming you're talking about Baker Mayfield as the guy that you could put behind those guys. I mean, you might even have to make that move. Like, you have Tyler Huntley. If Lamar Jackson never got hurt, you're kind of covered there, and you could always make just not use a quarterback in your super flex on bye weeks or whatever, and get by still. But if you can get a cheap quarterback, ironically, you did trade away Baker Mayfield, which is I think what Danny's talking about.
Yeah.
So he made a trade here. He sent away Baker Mayfield, Jordan Love, DeAndre Swift, DJ Moore, and Michael Pittman. Obviously, a lot of, ambiguous assets there. Swift, Moore, Pittman, solid guys, but not necessarily game wreckers. You got the best player in the NFL as part of this deal. Patrick Mahomes, I mean, you got the 101 or the 102, depending on your opinion on it, for a bunch of like mid-round startup picks at the best case, like round 5 to 7 round startup picks.
This is what, at most 3 to 3.5 first of value, if that max. Like,
yeah, I mean, if you're really high on Moore, he's a mid to late first value. If you're really high on Pittman, he's a mid to late first round value. If you're really high on Swift, he's a late first round, early second round value. Jordan Love, probably about the same, late first round value. Yeah, Mahomes, I would much rather, if I was the guy who traded Mahomes, I would have much rather traded him for 2 or 3 really good assets than 4 or 5, middling assets. So yeah, I think and also Brian Robinson's a solid option there to pick up as well. So yeah, definitely a good trade. I think you're in a good spot. You're a competitive team. You're lacking a little bit of depth at running back and quarterback, but your wide receiver and tight end core are good to go. And I would be very encouraged going into the season and ready to compete. I think you're short one move though. I would probably be looking to make a move at running back, at quarterback. Go to the teams that maybe look like they're trying to rebuild but haven't been able to sell their assets off yet. Maybe you can send your 2024 first for James Conner and Christian Kirk or something like that. You get yourself a depth running back and your another wide receiver to throw into your flex spot.
Agree with you there. Overall, if you have nothing else to add, I think we can move on to the next team. Do you think?
Yeah, let's go on to Dina's team here. Mother Flocker tier member as well. 12-team standard format league, 4-point per passing touchdown, super flex league. The team, as you guys can see there, Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. That's a pretty nice stack there with Baker Mayfield in reserve. Derrick Henry, Travis Etienne, James Conner as the main running backs. Devontae Smith, Rashad Bateman, Jaden Reed, Brandon Cooks. So a little light at wide receiver, George Kittle at tight end, and then an extra 1 in 2024, and it looks like every other pick except for the 3rd in 2024 as well. So Dina asks, should I move 2024 assets to compete in 2023 or move older assets to compete later, or hold both basically and be like a house money team, no tight end premium? She basically, he or she basically says, how important is it to upgrade at tight end now? I would say your tight end is fine. You have George Kittle. You're totally fine there. But what are your thoughts on the 2024 picks? Are you looking to punt this thing, maybe sell off Derrick Henry and, try and rebuild it in the long term, or are you looking to maybe sell one of your picks and go all in?
So I'm entering the year house money. Obviously, if, Henry's off to a legendary type of season because he's just a Hall of Fame type of player, Connor's getting the workload, ETN is showing out in that offense. If you want to potentially try to buy some wide receiver talent, especially with that 1st and 2nd at that point, maybe you can get Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, and a 3rd back or something like that in that type of scenario. At that point, you want to do that, go for it. But realistically, again, I'm hopping into it house money. That would be the high end, scenario where your team's performing well. But hypothetically, Derrick Henry's not playing well because the offense isn't good. Your wide receivers are struggling outside of your top 3 there with Devontae Smith, Rashad Bateman, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. And let's just say your quarterbacks got off to a slow start, as random as that is. Obviously, they're superstar players. Let's say they got off to a 20-point per game start and you start the year 1-3 or 1-4 or something. At that point, I would kind of engage to see what exactly the going rate for Henry and Connor are specifically, because I do think the nucleus of this team is already intact. You have your quarterbacks. Let's just say stacked is an understatement for what you got at quarterback here. Your wide receivers, you got good building blocks. Your tight end, you got a sick tight end there with George Kittle from an advantage standpoint. And obviously your main building block at running back, Travis Etienne, we both like as well. I would say that in that scenario, you can sell maybe Henry and Connor together, see if you can get a first from someone at that point. If you can get 3 first-round picks, you go into the offseason, you have ETN already, and at that point, we have a strong running back class next year to add to the team. You had 1 running back and then 2 wide receivers with those picks. I think this is going to be an extremely strong team because, like I said, the nucleus is absolutely ludicrous with what you were able to build there. Overall, a very strongly built team from a structure standpoint. I would also say that this deal you made was an absolute money move, trading 201, 204, and the 207, getting Travis Etienne back. I personally value Etienne as like the 108. So me personally, I view a drop off after the 108 in the rookie draft. So if you're telling me hypothetically, if this was a rookie draft and someone offered me the 201, the 204, and the 207 for the 108, I would just rather have the 108. So therefore, I would much rather have ETN.
Yeah, especially in a start 9 format where it's not going to be as deep of starting lineups. This team's kind of at a pivot point. I would say this is going to completely rely on your evaluation of your league market, because if you can sell Derrick Henry for a boatload because it's a redraft centric league, then I would pivot this team away from a contending team. I would pivot, but like given this ETN trade, it looks like your team may value picks very highly. So in that case, I might be looking to buy, like Danny said, like a competitive wide receiver. Maybe you can go to a rebuilding team and they like Rashad Bateman. Rashad Bateman's a young wide receiver. You give him a 2024 mid-first on top of, Rashad Bateman, and you can get yourself Stephon Diggs and Keenan Allen and Mike Evans or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're trying to tear down their team, and you're able to go after some of their production, because if you add a couple pieces to the team, you can be productive, or you could take a couple pieces away from this team and continue to build out some picks for 2024 and build out, a long-term productive struggle, probably be a house money contender by 2024 as well. So you have a lot of different directions you can go with this. It's really all going to depend on what you're getting offered for your players that are older and what you can get in terms of older players if you're going after them. So we can move on to the final team of the video. It's a 10-team Superflex PPR league there. You guys can see the team: Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, and Anthony Richardson, along with Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo. So like 5 deep at quarterback. Travis Etienne, Zach Charbonnet, David Montgomery, Kareem Hunt, Leonard Fournette. Pretty decent core there. Garrett Wilson, Quentin Johnson, and some others. DeAndre Hopkins, Jaden Reed, and some other guys there at wide receiver. Dallas Goedert, David Njoku, and Trey McBride and Luke Musgrave. So pretty strong at tight end as well. Has an extra second-round pick, and then also has a bunch of trades listed here. So he said he just had the startup. He felt like he got really good values at other positions besides wide receiver. That tends to happen. I mean, some of the rooms that we play in, it's like receivers are just fucking flying off the board, and it's difficult to get them sometimes. He says he got Kyler at 3.7 and Anthony Richardson at 4.4. So that's pretty ridiculous to get that kind of value at quarterback after already having Justin Herbert on your team. He said he got Fournette and Hunt in like the 21st and 23rd round respectively. And he said he was frustrated because he couldn't grab any wide receivers, but he kind of just took the value. And we always preach that. I'm glad you stuck to that. And you took the value when it was on the board, and you didn't reach on like Christian Watson at 3.7 because you needed a wide receiver and took him over Kyler Murray or something like that. So yeah, definitely a great move to keep your composure and just take the players that you want there. He says already in talks with some people, and a lot of them value wide receiver similar to quarterback, which is frustrating in terms of trading. What do I do if my league market is lower on quarterbacks? Plan to sell off every running back I have and wide receivers and tank for Caleb Williams, or any other kind of apparent moves. Also has all of his 2026 picks listed as well. He also actually did message me and said he submitted a team recently, and he has some updates since he last submitted this. So he also told me he made a deal with Herbert and QJ. So I think he has this trade listed here. So potential trade, you guys can see it there. Justin Herbert and Quentin Johnson, he would send away for a 2024 first, a 2025 first, a 2026 first, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and then some mid-round picks, a 24 second, 25 third, and a 26 third. So he said he made the deal. So he basically punted away Justin Herbert and got a bunch of picks in Jackson Smith and Jigba for him.
Yeah, in a typical league market, I personally think I could get a little bit more for Herbert. But if you said that everybody is wary about quarterbacks and you already have Anthony Richardson, Kyler Murray, who you're anticipating potentially missing some game time, I don't think this is a bad pivot, to be honest. You're upgrading QJ into Jackson Smith and Jigba. You're getting 3 first-rounders, a second, and 2 thirds. Like I said, I would probably take Herbert on face value, but given your league market, I actually don't think this is a bad deal whatsoever. You still have strength at quarterback. You still have building blocks. And as much as I like Quentin Johnson, JSN offers an upgrade in terms of building blocks at wide receiver. Not to mention, when you're combining that, now you have 2 2024 firsts, 3 2025 first, and 2 2026 first, assuming you didn't trade your 2026 first away. So I like what you're able to do. You still have now a lot of flexibility to be able to add to your running back and wide receiver core. Running backs, realistically, like, there's not much you have to add there. I think Etienne, Charbonnet, Montgomery should be able to do you good, at least for the intermediate future. The one thing I would say, because you're not competing in 2024, is if David Montgomery gets off to a Jamal Williams type of start, and you could potentially add David Montgomery in a second for a guy who's competing his late first, or hypothetically, you can trade it to a middle type of projected team who's trying to compete, and you can get their second and third, or David Montgomery in a third for their 2 seconds. Like, I would look to make that type of move because, like we kind of said, you have the shell here. You obviously had to have a couple wide receivers, but your tight end's already set with Goddard and Njoku, McBride, and Musgrave. Although you lost Justin Herbert, you still have Kyler and Anthony Richardson, like I said, and you have those boatload of picks to be able to load up.
Yeah, it looks like the cheapest place you're going to get wide receiver talent is in the rookie draft, most likely, if everybody's going to value them this highly on the open market. And I mean, selling Jameson Williams for a first and a second of any kind is a perfect example of that. I would easily take that over Jameson Williams. You offload all that risk. That team, you have no idea where that team, like, he has it listed as mid here, just probably because of, he has no idea where the pick's going to end up being. But what happens if that's an early first? You might have netted a quarterback prospect, a high-end running back prospect, high-end wide receiver prospect for Jameson Williams, who's a very risky acquisition. He also says he has an offer on the table for Garrett Wilson and Jackson Smith and Jigba. So he has both of those guys on his team for a 2024 first and second, which project to be mid to late, T. Higgins and Christian Watson. He said, what are your thoughts on that deal? So he'd be trading away Garrett Wilson and JSN, which I personally just wouldn't do this trade because you're aligning your winning window with like long term. And Garrett Wilson and JSN are second year rookie wide receivers. So they're going to be relevant for a long time. As good as T. Higgins and Christian Watson are, that 2024 first and second isn't moving the needle enough for me to move off of those two like stable building blocks at wide receiver.
Yeah, I would agree. So if you're doing the math, what was it? T. Higgins, Christian Watson, first and a second. If you're doing the math there for Garrett Wilson and who was the other one? JSN?
Higgins in a 1 is enough for Garrett Wilson, and
yeah,
Watson in a 2 would be basically JSN, is basically how I break that down.
Yeah, which, I mean, it's probably fair on face value, but like Corey kind of said, just stick with your window.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say overall, you're building out a strong, 1-year punt, 2-year punt potentially, and you're going to build out this strong team, especially come 2025 when you spend those picks that you have. I would keep aiming for 2025 picks if you wanted to. Like, if we get to mid-season and somebody's competing and they want to give you a 2025 first and a 2025 second and like a young receiver for Travis Etienne because they want him on their team and Etienne's having a breakout season, by all means do something like that. Like Danny said with Montgomery, Charbonnet as well. I'm really only married to a couple assets on this team: Murray, Richardson, even Purdy, because I think he has some upside. And then some of your stable building block receivers, Garrett Wilson, and then JSN pretty much. And then, some of your other guys there, Goddard and Njoku, same thing. If people want a tight end on their team and they want to pay up for those guys, definitely makes some sense there as well. So pretty well built team. All of these teams, like I said, were submissions from our Flock Fantasy site. So if you guys want access to Dynasty decisions, we definitely will cover some free teams in the next video that we did, because I know we have the queue really backed up. But if you do want to skip the line, if you have a rookie draft coming up, or whatever the case is, you can check out our site, flockfantasy.com/FSE will get you first priority submissions to Dynasty decisions. If you sign up, you guys have been seeing it going along the ticker this whole time. If you sign up for an annual Mother Flocker tier member right now, you can get not only 30% off, not only a 2-day free trial, 6 months for free when you sign up annually, but you'll also get a Zoom consultation, which whichever one of us you want to have that with. And we can break down as many Dynasty teams as you want, as many, redraft questions, best ball questions, whatever you want to talk about. We will have that covered. And like I said, that is for annual Mother Flocker tier members if you sign up using the promo code FSE. So check that out if you're interested. Check out all our sponsors if you want to support us in any way. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.